Hi, welcome to Jeff's channel. In this summer, Donald Trump's immigration policy had provoked massive protests across the US. I just found this interesting because very similar things also happened in ancient and pre-war Japan. So today, let's dive into the history of Oni, one of the most well-known yokai, and see how the concept of this famous yokai shaped the Japanese society and changed the direction of Japanese history. Although the name Oni might not ring the bell with you, you must have been familiar with this kind of fierce red, blue, or yellow creature with long horns, sharp fangs, and bulging eyes. But do you know the image of Oni has shifted a lot since the concept spread to Japan from China in around 8th century, also known as Heian period. Ancient Chinese believed that after death people became ghosts, or gui. The character or kanji was later used for the term Oni in Japanese. The major differences in China, gui are disembodied spirits and could be either good or bad. Japanese Oni, on the other hand, are monsters with substantial bodies, and they're always evil. They were said to wield big iron clubs, crushing and eating humans just for fun. The standard image of Oni appeared even later. In around 12th century, when Buddhist tales became popular in Japan, various Oni appear in illustrations, some red, some blue, and others with the heads of horses or oxen. It is reasonable to believe that the image of Oni during this period was syncretized with Yaksha, the man-devouring demon. Buddhists believe that only wicked souls beyond rehabilitation will transform into such a wicked creature after death. And when Japanese adopted the concept, they began to believe that people who were even worse could turn into Oni while alive. In other words, they gradually find a good excuse to play the Oni card and stigmatize the people they didn't like. So we can see that from late 12th century, the Kamakura period, women were increasingly linked to Oni as they lost social status. For example, this mask, named Hanya, is no stranger to people in the Western world. The name Hanya is a Buddhist term, literally meaning wisdom. It was so named because ancient Japanese believed it would take a great deal of wisdom to create such a mask. But things represented by this mask had changed a lot over time. No later than the Kamakura period, the mask was used to portray the souls of women who had become demons due to obsession or jealousy. Well, I mean, generally speaking, ancient Buddhism was a misogynistic religion from the outset. Buddhists believe that women are naturally inferior to men because they're always slaves of their own desires and weakness. Men, on the other hand, are strong enough to overcome their obstacles and achieve enlightenment. Well, I'm not trying to be harsh with Buddhism. It's a religion formed more than 2,000 years ago, and all people 2,000 years ago was sexist. So, it was just a holdover from the ancient social norms. Like in Christianity, Jesus also didn't allow women to teach and asked them to be silent. And we're glad to see that all religions evolved over time and will continue to do so. But anyway, during Japan's Kamakura and the Muromachi periods, there were many stories about the women driven mad by envy and finally become horrible Oni. The most typical example is the legend of the girl once living in Shinano province. She was named Momiji, the red maple leaf, and her appearance was exactly as beautiful as her name. When she came of age, she became a mistress of the lord of the powerful Minamoto clan. It soon triggered the jealousy of the lord's wife, and she convinced the lord that Momiji was a witch. As a result, Momiji was expelled from the lord's castle and sent to the distant Shinano province, where she was welcomed by the locals for her beauty, talents, and courtly knowledge. She eventually gathered a band of followers and began raiding the surrounding areas. The imperial court soon viewed Momiji as a threat and publicly described her as a kijo, or demoness. A decorated general was sent to crush her rebellion, and the government declared the general was armed with a divine sword, so he could beat Momiji's supernatural power and behead her. After Momiji was killed, the emperor even renamed the village Kinasa, a village without demons. You see, in a society centered by men, women were outsiders. The male rulers were not able to understand why a woman, an inferior woman, could gain massive support to become strong enough to fight against them. And in fact, they didn't want to understand. Those men's enormous ego didn't allow them to doubt if women were really as weak as men thought they were. Nor did they could afford to admit that a peasant woman could gather so many peasants like herself and cause so much trouble to them. So they would rather choose a convenient explanation that the woman was a witch, an Oni. She could perform witchcraft. She was a demoness transformed. And okay, we have finally defeated her. That proved we have the god's blessings. And almost in the meantime, some records also claim that humans could give birth to Oni. Like in Okinawa, people believe that if women worked near banana trees at night, they would soon become pregnant, and the baby they gave birth to would have fangs or horns. To prevent those demon kids from becoming vicious Oni in the future, they had to be killed by poison as soon as they were born. We can't be sure, but you can certainly imagine how thousands of disabled or disfigured kids were cold-blooded murdered in the name of Oni hunt. And some peasants could abandon their children who would be difficult to raise and claim that the kids were Oni to justify what they did. And since Oni had a genuinely frightening image, slaying an Oni became a standard element of almost all famous samurai legends. The Minamoto clan, who later became the first shogunate of Japan, had an epic ancestor named Uramitsu. He was known for slaying the leader of Oni, Shutendoji. It was said during the Heian period, a large number of the young women were abducted by the power of Oni in Mount Oi. Per the emperor's order, Uramitsu and his friend disguised themselves as local priests and sneaked into the Oni king's lair. The Shutendoji sat on his throne. He was 50 feet in height, with 5 large horns and 2 bulging eyes on his giant red face. Knowing that the name Shutendoji means sake drinking lad, the warriors offered the Oni king the divine sake obtained from 3 shrines, putting the Oni to sleep. They then stormed into the Shutendoji's sleeping chamber and beheaded him. Shutendoji was considered the strongest Oni of Japan, and his story became the template for warriors of later times to boast about their courage and martial skills. Starting from the Meiji era, the concept of Oni became more closely associated with wartime enemies and eventually expanded to all foreign people. During the Russo-Japanese War, there were picture books showing the famous Momotaro subjugating Russian Oni. Momotaro was a divine boy, born from a giant peach. As he grew up, he penetrated the ocean's lair and captured the Oni king with his friends, a talking dog, monkey, and peasant. The legend kept being used in Imperial Japan for xenophobic propaganda. In the 1920s to 1930s, many schools were instructed to teach young students that the Westerners were all Oni, and the children were encouraged to act like Momotaro. They were told to trick, throw stones at foreign immigrants, and call it Oni fighting. And after the Pacific War began, Japan released the first full-length anime, Momotaro Sacred Sailors. In the film, the only Momotaro fought were depicted as American soldiers with single horns. And especially during the time the militarist government forced teenage soldiers to commit suicidal attacks, they brazenly romanticized all these brutal stuff as brave boy warriors kicked the ass of the evil Oni, until the 2 A-bombs and the final unconditional surrender. So, the women, the unwanted children, and the foreigner. From ancient time, Japanese people described their target for prejudice, exclusion, and conquest as Oni, which were blamed for any kind of national crisis. By reinforcing the fixed image of Oni, they could find a way to reconcile with themselves while refusing to think about the manifested nature of certain groups or looking back and solving their own social issues. Such self-deception was very dangerous because it would lead to bigger problems like the rise of extremism and even militarism. True, it's always convenient to think that you can make everything right and your country great again by getting rid of the people you labeled as Oni. But you know it was a lie. Japan itself was a perfect example. The Momotaro who waged the war were finally down to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and the country once seeing foreigners as demons finally had the door open and embraced people they feared and hated in the past. Xenophobia and separatism make no sense and will lead nowhere. And if we really want a great country and a better world, we need to end this kind of ignorance and always consider whether we hold any prejudiced viewpoints. Okay, the story of Oni today is coming to an end. Please subscribe to my channel for more stories, films, and manga about those fantastic Japanese yokai. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.